She says, I've struggled with having to be the quote unquote bigger person in most situations, and I have a lot of resentment about this. As someone who's been in therapy and done spiritual work for many years, I've made a lot of progress about how I behave interpersonally, and I've learned how to respond rather than react, and how to communicate assertively, and how to set boundaries, and I've gained a sense of knowing when it's better to just let things go rather than getting into a pissing contest. And yet, when someone, whether it's a stranger or someone I know, yells at me over something seemingly trivial, I do know that it's not really about me, and it's more likely about something that they're going through. And I know that their anger is displaced. However, I am human, and interactions like this still throw me into flight or fight mode. And even if I remain calm on the surface, my blood pressure is still rising underneath. Now, part of me, the inner child, I suppose, finds it so unfair that I don't get to be petty like other people do. God, I love this. When really I know that if I behaved in that uncontrolled, reactive way, it wouldn't feel vindicating as it did in the days before my spiritual growth. I would just feel disappointed in myself. So how do I navigate these situations? So, you're right on the money with this, I think. It's the child. I think sometimes you guys just amaze me how articulately you describe these very, very human dilemmas. Like, I actually had a friend say something like this to me a couple of years ago, and it just made me laugh. Like, she goes, I just don't get the fun out of being an asshole like I used to. Like, she goes, it's not fun anymore. I know too much. I know that if I'm really being a jerk, karmically, it's just going to come back on me later. Or, I don't actually, I'm having the experience that anything negative that I put out in the universe, I'm also affecting myself with. I mean, she goes, for the days of just being, completely clueless. But, you're absolutely right. Something happens. The way I see it is, and I really mean this, it is an incredible, incredible privilege to be able to evolve spiritually. It's a privilege. It doesn't happen in every life. You could have a life where, the soul just has no interest, and it's just like, I'm just going to go through the world just rampaging my way and, creating hell wherever I go, and that could just be the life. But I really see it like this. It's an enormous privilege when the soul comes into an incarnation and says, I really want to get my shit together this life. Everything you said, I don't want to just blunder through just reacting and doing whatever the heck I want and, not worrying about the consequences of my actions. Like, something happens when the soul begins to long for that, taking responsibility for itself. It's a privilege. That's all I know. And so it doesn't make the road easy, but it makes it right. When we were talking about that on the other call about letting go of the payoff. I don't know if you heard that call, but I think it was 1 or 2 weeks ago. It's like, if you release the payoff and you're like, well, the result of this is, nobody should ever talk to me badly, or, the result of this is like, I'm working all this stuff inside of myself. The way I would see it is that sometimes it's only when somebody does something like a stranger. I remember once I was in Singapore and a woman spit at me in my face. It's about 20 years ago. And I'll never forget that, because it was such an opportunity to not feel hatred for her. She was just so a local Singapore woman, and for all I know, she was just like, I was just an annoying American who was over there, and I never had been spit in my face before. And I remember thinking of that so clearly, like, if I can hold this state and just feel metta for her. I mean, of course, there was a shock and there was all of this, but it was important to me to try to do that. And so that's what I think is you're bringing up the paradox of you do the work and then the things that come at some level, if you really say on the inside, open my heart, let me view this person with compassion. Let me view them as somebody with their own karma and their own suffering and their own horrors. And let me just send compassion for that. It's the easiest way to move through things without holding on to resentment about the person. Like that's the downside of what you're talking about, and you know that. You hold on to the bitterness and resentment, you're still carrying the person around. You carry them everywhere you go. Can't stop thinking about that idiot who spit at you. But if you move into that place of the compassion, you're not carrying them anymore. So I just find it really practical. I didn't want to carry all these people around. It's exhausting. I don't do most of this stuff because I'm any great being. I do it because it's too freaking exhausting to live any other way. I don't want to carry anyone else on my back through bitterness or resentment. And then when you discover that you can offer all of that back to the divine, and the burden will be taken by the great I, it's astonishing. Absolutely astonishing. The freedom of it is astonishing. So I think it partly comes from saying it's happening for me as opposed to me. It's like it's coming on the outside to help me get established in more compassion, more inner power, so that the inner power is unshakable regardless of what's coming on the outside. If you want to read somebody who wrote about that really well, read some James Baldwin, just talking about the horrific things, being a Black gay man really at that time, and how he learned to hold on to that power on the inside. I mean, a lot of people have written about it, but that feeling of that you don't have to live from that place of other people's wounds, it's really powerful. So anyway, thank you for sending that.